Have you ever found yourself saying yes, when, inside, everything in you was screaming no? Have you ever smiled to keep the peace, even when you were about to crumble inside? Maybe you are tired, exhausted, but you don't exactly know why. There is a type of suffering that leaves no visible marks. A silent, persistent pain, hard to name. And it arises when you start betraying yourself every day, one gesture at a time. You act as expected. You modulate your voice, choose the right words, hide what you feel. All to avoid bothering, to not disappoint, to be accepted. You adapt. And for a while, it even seems to work. People like you. You become reliable, pleasant, predictable. But behind this perfectly constructed social mask, a void begins to emerge. A discomfort that grows slowly. A feeling that something in you is being forgotten, left behind, suffocated. Carl Jung called this mask persona. It is necessary. We all need it to navigate the world, to participate in social life. But there is a real danger when we stop wearing the mask and start to become the mask. When we forget that behind the character there is a real person, with desires that don't fit, with anger that isn't polite, with thoughts that aren't pleasing. When this happens, something begins to break inside. You feel it, but you can't explain it. As if you were living someone else's life. As if you were an actor on a stage where the play never ends. This video is not about becoming a filterless rebel, nor about abandoning all forms of coexistence. It is about something deeper, recognizing when the need to be accepted is distancing you from who you really are. It is about stopping and looking inward, and facing the truth that you have been living more to please than to exist authentically. And believe me, this kind of self-abandonment comes at a cost, in the form of anxiety, of identity crises, of resentments you don't know where they come from, and of a deep, silent sadness. Here, we will talk about this straightforwardly. We will confront this destructive pattern of living for others. We will understand what Jung discovered about the relationship between the ego, the persona, and the unconscious. We will explore why the compulsion to please is not just a personality trait, but a symptom that you are disconnected from your essence. And more importantly, we will talk about the possible path back to yourself. This video is a mirror, and perhaps a punch in the stomach. But if you are here, it's because at some level, you already feel that you can't continue like this. So take a deep breath, because today's journey may shake everything you thought you knew about yourself. From an early age, you learned to behave, to hide what you feel so as not to hurt others, to control your impulses so as not to seem selfish, to smile even when you wanted to disappear. You learned that, to be accepted, you needed to be convenient. And thus, without realizing it, you shaped a socially acceptable version of yourself, a persona. The persona, as Jung described, is a psychic construct, a kind of character we create to interact with the outside world. It is important, even necessary. It is thanks to it that we can work, participate in groups, live in society. The problem begins when we stop seeing the persona as a functional mask and start to believe that it is who we are. You act as if you are always calm, even when you are boiling inside. You become that person who is always available, always helpful, always balanced, because that is the role they have learned to expect from you. But the truth is that every time you pretend to be okay when you are not, every time you ignore your anger to avoid conflict, every time you say, "It's fine," when everything in you says it isn't, a small piece of you is silenced. This continuous repetition of internal denials creates cracks, and these cracks accumulate. Over time, the person behind the mask begins to disappear. You no longer know what you really want. You can no longer identify what you feel. Your desires become confusing. Your decisions, automatic. You live according to what others expect, not what you believe or desire. It is here that the persona ceases to be an adaptive tool and transforms into a psychic prison. And the cruelest part of it all is that, on the outside, everything seems to work. You receive compliments, people trust you, you seem successful, functional, even happy. But inside, something is dying. The mask has become skin, and you no longer know how to take it off without losing everything you have built. But is maintaining this image worth the price of giving up yourself? How many times have you stayed silent to avoid confrontation? How many times have you regretted saying yes? How many times have you smiled on the outside and screamed on the inside? The truth is that the persona should never command your life. When you identify too much with this role, you begin to live as a shadow of yourself. And this, over time, disconnects you from the soul, the living center of your existence. It is exactly at this point that something inside you begins to rebel. And this rebellion has a name: internal conflict. In the next part, we will dive into this silent clash between the ego and the unconscious, and understand what happens inside you when you start to live in disagreement with your own truth. Let's move forward. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. There is a war happening inside you, and the battlefield is invisible. On one side is the ego, the conscious part of your psyche, which seeks adaptation, recognition, stability, belonging. It is the ego that wants to keep its social image intact, that fears rejection, that tries to control everything to ensure that you continue to be accepted. On the other side is the unconscious, deep, symbolic, wild, and it does not negotiate. It wants truth. While the ego tries to keep the persona functioning, the unconscious begins to react. And it does not do this with clear words. It sends subtle signals, diffuse discomforts, disproportionate emotions, unexplainable physical sensations. You feel anxious for no reason, irritated by small things, tired even after sleeping, sad even when everything seems right. These symptoms are just the beginning. They are the muffled cry of the soul that is being ignored. Jung said that when the ego distances itself too much from the psychic totality, the unconscious begins to compensate. It is like an internal scale trying to restore balance. And the more the ego insists on maintaining appearances, the more the unconscious reacts with intensity. If you push the persona too hard, the unconscious responds with shadow. And the shadow, when repressed, does not disappear. It seeps in your automatic behaviors, in your relationships, in your self-destructive choices, in your constant feeling of being disconnected from yourself. This psychic conflict generates a state of chronic tension. You try to keep everything under control, but something always slips away. You do the right thing, but feel empty. You act as expected, but deep down feel anger, contempt, fatigue. And this bottled-up anger is not directed at others, it is directed at yourself. Each time you betray yourself to be accepted, you disappoint yourself. And the pain of this does not appear all at once. It accumulates. It devours your vitality from within. It is a corrosion of the soul. The problem is that this conflict is not visible to the eyes. People look at you and say you are fine. You smile, do your work, manage everything. But inside, you no longer know what you are feeling. You only know that something is wrong. And you can no longer pretend that everything is okay. You can continue to ignore these signals. You can keep saying it is just a phase. You can keep trying to adapt. But the price of this is high. An existence without authenticity, without purpose, without soul. But there is a way to better understand why this pattern forms and why some people seem to be even more vulnerable to it. people who live for others, who feel guilty for having their own needs, who erase themselves without realizing it. Jung identified a particular psychological type that is especially susceptible to this dynamic, and it is about this type that we will talk now. In the next part, you will discover if this type describes exactly who you are, and why this knowledge may be the key to begin to break out of this cycle. Let's continue. Not everyone deals with the world in the same way. Jung showed us that each individual has a unique psychic structure, formed by psychological functions and fundamental attitudes that determine how we perceive reality and make decisions. Among the different psychological types, there is one in particular that carries a structural fragility when it comes to pleasing others, the extroverted feeling type. This type not only desires connection, it needs it. For them, being in harmony with the social environment is almost a matter of emotional survival. Their internal system is built to pick up on what others feel, think, and expect. They enter an environment and immediately adjust their behavior to please, avoid friction, and ensure acceptance. Their focus is not on themselves, but on others. Their sense of identity, self-esteem, and psychic security. All of this is anchored in the reflection they see in others' eyes. On the surface, this may seem like mere empathy, kindness, or diplomacy. But when taken to the extreme, and it almost always is, this way of functioning becomes fertile ground for self-betrayal. The extroverted feeling type lives for approval. Their internal moral compass easily gets lost because they are constantly trying to align with external values, even if those values conflict with their inner truth. They may advocate for ideas they do not believe in, maintain relationships that suffocate them, accept situations that make them ill, all to maintain an image of acceptance. This type has not learned to ask, "What do I want?" but rather, "What do they expect from me?" And this inversion of axis inevitably leads to collapse. Because no matter how hard they try, it will never be possible to please everyone, and each failure, each rejection, each criticism is felt as a direct attack on their very existence. And the most dangerous part? Often, this type does not even realize they are betraying themselves, because they live in an automatic mode, addicted to the feeling of being needed, loved, and accepted. They confuse being loved with being useful. And when they are not playing the role of pleasant, helpful, understanding, they feel they have no value, as if their presence has no justification unless they are serving someone. But beware, this dynamic is not exclusive to this type. It appears in varying degrees in many of us. Whenever you say yes just to avoid displeasing someone, whenever you withhold your opinion out of fear of rejection, whenever you downplay your pain to avoid bothering others, in those moments, you are operating within the same psychic logic, that being accepted is worth more than being authentic. However, this game has a price, and your unconscious will start to signal. And it does not signal with clear phrases. It signals with symbols, with dreams, with strange compulsions and symptoms that seem to have no explanation. The unconscious begins to silently show everything you are refusing to see. And it is exactly about these invisible, but absolutely crucial signs that we will talk about in the next part. We will understand how the unconscious tries to rescue your truth when you insist on ignoring it. We will talk about dreams, symbols, and the messages of the soul that you need to finally learn to listen to. Get ready to dive even deeper. The unconscious does not speak the language of logic. It does not express itself with clear sentences, rational arguments, or direct warnings. It whispers, and sometimes shouts, through images, impulses, symbols, sensations, and repetitive experiences. When you start to live in dissonance with your inner truth, the unconscious does not remain silent. It tries to restore psychic balance by sending signals. But the problem is that most people have not been taught to listen. These signals can come in the form of strange and intense dreams. You dream that you are naked in public, that you are being chased, that you try to speak, but no one listens, that you are trapped somewhere you cannot escape. These dreams are not sleep nonsense. They are coded messages, symbolic representations of a collapsing psychic state. Nakedness may represent the forced exposure of your essence, the chase, the internal pressure of the persona, silence, the impotence of your will, imprisonment, the entrapment of the soul in a life that no longer belongs to you. Other signals come through the body. Pains without medical cause, chronic exhaustion, panic attacks, shortness of breath, insomnia. The body, as an extension of the psyche, also protests. When the symbolic language is not heard, the unconscious resorts to physical language. It is the last resort to pull you out of autopilot and force a confrontation with what has been neglected for too long. And there are also compulsive behaviors. You say everything is fine, but you eat too much, buy too much, distract yourself too much, overload on social media, stimuli, tasks. All to avoid being alone with the silence, because in the silence, you begin to hear the soul. And it has things to say. But facing these truths hurts. It hurts to realize that you have built a life that has nothing to do with who you are. It hurts to admit that many of the choices you made did not come from desire, but from fear. Fear of not being loved, fear of disappointing, fear of being rejected. But ignoring these signals does not make them disappear. On the contrary, the more you resist, the more they intensify. The psyche does not tolerate lies for long. It demands wholeness. And if you refuse to connect with your truth, it will do everything to force you to look, even if that means breaking everything around you. Jung said that the unconscious has a compensatory role. That is, it tries to rebalance the psyche when the ego goes too far in one direction. If you spend all your time pleasing, denying your desires, avoiding conflict, the unconscious will push you to the opposite. Aggressive dreams, impulses to break free, emotional crises that put you face to face with your shadow. And as frightening as this may seem, there is something profoundly healing in this process, because it is from this symbolic collapse that you can begin the reconstruction, but now, from the inside out. However, for this, it takes more than intellectually understanding the problem. It requires initiating a deep process of psychic transformation, a path that Jung called individuation. In the next part, we will talk about this process, what it really means, why it is painful but liberating, and how it can free you from the prison of the persona without destroying everything you have built. Let's walk together towards wholeness. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebook, Beyond the Shadow. It breaks down Jung's core ideas and gives you tools to understand yourself more deeply. Link is in the pinned comment. There comes a moment when pleasing others becomes too costly. You realize that no matter how hard you try to maintain the perfect image, something inside you is crumbling. The fatigue is no longer just physical, it is existential. The emptiness is no longer an occasional discomfort. It is a constant void. The feeling of living a life that is not yours becomes unbearable. And it is exactly at this breaking point that the process of individuation can begin. Individuation, according to Jung, is not a spiritual luxury. It is a deep psychic necessity. It represents the movement of the soul towards wholeness, the integration of all parts of oneself, including those that have been denied, repressed, or forgotten so that you could function socially. It is not about abandoning the persona, but about breaking the total identification with it, about stopping to believe that you are just the role you play, about remembering that there is a deeper self behind the masks. This process is not simple. It requires confrontation. It involves looking at everything that has been swept under the rug of consciousness, the swallowed frustrations, the ignored desires, the fears disguised as responsibility. It involves facing the shadow, everything you do not want to be, but that you are. Your contradictions, your ambiguous impulses, your anger, your pride, your need for control, your emotional lack, everything you hide even from yourself. Individuation requires the courage to disobey others' expectations, to disappoint those who have always expected you to be someone you are not, to give up superficial praise and seek an inner coherence that, at first, seems lonely, but is liberating. This path is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming whole. You begin to recognize that you are made of opposites, of light and shadow, of strength and fragility. And by accepting this, you stop living for what others think. You start living from within yourself. And here lies the most challenging point. You may lose people. You may lose status, comfort, control. But what you gain is infinitely more valuable. Your soul back, your voice, your will, your connection to something that comes from within, and that does not depend on anyone's validation. Individuation is this radical movement of returning to inner truth. It is the moment when you decide, with all the pain and beauty that this implies, to live from your center and no longer from the reflection of others. It is a long process, inconvenient, transformative, but it is the only real path to freedom. Because as long as you are just the persona, you will be a slave to the image, and images have no life of their own. They are projections, not existence. But what comes after that? What happens when you start living from who you really are? How do you face the world without the mask, without the character, without the armor of the persona? What comes after the pain of disidentification and before the peace of rediscovery? In the last part of this video, we will talk about that. About the truth that scares, but also liberates. Let's go together to the end, which, like every profound end, is also a beginning. At this point, you might be feeling something strange, a mix of relief and discomfort, because, in some way, all of this makes sense, but it's also too uncomfortable to ignore. And it's precisely this discomfort that indicates something in you has started to move. The truth is that if you've made it this far, you are no longer the same as when you began. Because now you know. And when the truth enters, it doesn't leave quietly. You are not here to be what others expect of you. You didn't come into the world to play a role, please invisible audiences, and collect approvals while silencing your own soul. You are here to live authentically, to be whole, to walk with both feet firmly in your own truth, even if it costs you praise, friendships, stability, convenience, because what you lose on this path was never really yours. And what you gain is everything. The persona can protect you, it can give you a place in the world, but it will never give you peace, because peace doesn't come from the outside. Peace is born from the internal alignment between what you feel, what you think, what you believe, and what you live. And this peace, this deep coherence, is only possible when you have the courage to stop betraying yourself. Freedom doesn't come when others approve of you. It comes when you finally approve of yourself. When you can look in the mirror without masks and say, I am here by my side, no matter what happens. And this choice, to be on your own side, is a silent revolution that changes everything. But this revolution doesn't happen all at once. It starts in stages, in small decisions, in conversations like this. So, if this video moved you, if at any moment you felt it was speaking directly to your soul, I want you to comment down below. Write what you are feeling right now. Share what touched you most deeply. Give voice to what is moving inside you. This space is also yours. And by writing, you not only share, you commit to yourself. And remember, this is just one step. There is a next video waiting for you, and it is important. Perhaps even more than this one, because the path of self-knowledge, once started, cannot be interrupted. It can only be deepened. So keep going, go back inside, and be ready to go even deeper. The truth sets you free, but only when you choose to face it to the end. See you there.